In today's video, we're looking at the most reckless snake encounters ever documented, from a selfie attempt with a cobra that turned deadly in seconds to a drunk backyard dare that ended in tragedy. But first, let's look at the fatal mistake of a 24-year-old farm worker in India who decided a spectacled cobra would make the perfect photo opportunity, ignoring every instinct that could have saved his life. It was May 18, 2016. The afternoon sun blazed across rural farmland outside a city in central India, temperatures climbing past 95 degrees Fahrenheit as the dry season reached its peak. The heat shimmered off the dusty fields, creating waves of distortion in the distance. Rahul Patil worked alongside relatives, clearing brush from a field near their home. He was 24 years old, with a reputation among friends for taking risks that made others uncomfortable. His social media accounts showed a pattern of close encounters with animals, photos taken at distances that local elders warned against. Friends described him as someone who constantly sought attention and validation through increasingly dangerous stunts. Around 4:30 p.m., one of the workers spotted a spectacled cobra hiding beneath a pile of dry branches. The snake, likely seeking shade from the intense heat, remained coiled and motionless as the group gathered around. The worker who discovered it, an older man with decades of farming experience, immediately called for everyone to step back and give the snake space to escape. Spectacled cobras are highly venomous snakes, native to the Indian subcontinent. Adults typically measure between 4 and 6 feet in length. Their venom is primarily neurotoxic, attacking the nervous system and causing respiratory failure if untreated. A single bite can deliver enough venom to kill an adult human within hours, sometimes faster depending on the bite location and amount of venom injected. Instead of leaving the snake alone, Rahul grabbed a long stick and approached the cobra, ignoring the protests from the older workers. The snake's hood flared slightly, a clear warning signal that Rahul either didn't recognize or chose to ignore. He used the stick to pin the snake behind its head, then pulled out his phone with his free hand and positioned the camera at arm's length. He wanted something that would make people stop scrolling and pay attention. For several seconds, the snake remained relatively still, its movements restricted by the stick pressing against its neck. Rahul adjusted his grip, his attention focused entirely on the phone screen. He shifted his position slightly, bringing his face closer to the cobra to make the danger appear more dramatic. The other workers continued shouting warnings. One man moved forward as if to intervene but hesitated, unwilling to get close enough to risk being bitten himself. Then Rahul loosened his grip slightly while adjusting the angle of the phone. The cobra twisted its head sideways and upward with surprising speed, exploiting the momentary reduction in pressure. Rahul had angled the phone so close to his face that when the strike came, the fangs caught him on the left cheek before he could pull back. He jerked backward, dropping both the stick and his phone. The snake hit the ground and vanished into the surrounding brush within seconds. At first, Rahul insisted he was fine and laughed it off, even showing the photo he had taken moments earlier. His friends could see 2 small puncture marks on his left cheek, barely visible, but already beginning to swell. A thin trickle of blood ran down toward his jawline. Rahul wiped it away with the back of his hand, still smiling, still trying to maintain the appearance of control. Within 10 minutes, his demeanor began to change. He complained of a strange, tingling sensation spreading from the bite site across his face. His left eyelid started to droop. Within 20 minutes, he was dizzy, his speech slurred, complaining of difficulty swallowing. Friends loaded him into a vehicle and began the drive to the nearest medical facility, approximately 45 minutes away on rural roads. During the drive, Rahul's condition deteriorated rapidly. His breathing became shallow and labored, each breath requiring visible effort. He slumped against the door, his eyes half closed, no longer responding to questions from the others in the vehicle. The driver pushed the vehicle as fast as the rough roads would allow, honking continuously to clear livestock and pedestrians from the path. Other passengers called ahead to the medical facility, explaining the situation and requesting that antivenom be prepared. By the time they reached the facility, Rahul had lost consciousness, his breathing irregular with long pauses between breaths. Antivenom was administered immediately, but the delay had allowed the venom to advance far into his system. The facility had no mechanical ventilator. Staff attempted manual airway support, but sustaining adequate oxygenation by hand over hours is exhausting and inconsistent. Each lapse in rhythm allowed the paralysis to deepen. His blood pressure became unstable, requiring medication to maintain circulation. His family arrived within 2 hours of his admission, having been contacted by the workers who brought him in. They gathered in a waiting area, receiving periodic updates from medical staff about his deteriorating condition. He died approximately 8 hours after the bite. The cause of death was documented as respiratory failure caused by neurotoxic envenomation, with secondary complications, including cardiac arrest. The selfie, still saved on his phone, showed Rahul smiling with the cobra's head visible just inches from his face, its mouth slightly open in the moment before it struck. Rahul's story is one of overconfidence and a split second of lost control. But as we'll see in the next case, alcohol can eliminate even the instinct to hesitate, turning a backyard encounter into a slow and irreversible disaster. It was August 3, 2014, late on a warm Saturday night on the outskirts of a small desert community in rural Arizona, temperatures still hovering above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, even after sunset. The nearest town with a full-service hospital was over 70 miles away on a 2-lane highway that wound through open desert. Daniel Mercer, 31, was drinking with 2 friends in his backyard. Daniel worked as a warehouse supervisor and was known for his competitive nature and tendency to accept any challenge, particularly after drinking. His friends later told investigators he had consumed at least 6 beers over the previous 2 hours, possibly more. Daniel had moved to the area 3 years earlier from a Midwestern state where venomous snakes were rare. He had received multiple warnings from neighbors about rattlesnakes that frequently appeared in yards during summer months, and had dismissed them as exaggeration. Western diamondback rattlesnakes are among the most dangerous snakes in North America. Their venom destroys blood cells and tissue while disrupting the body's ability to clot. Without treatment, severe bites can lead to life-threatening bleeding complications. Fatalities in the United States are rare. Fewer than 1 in 200 documented bites results in death when treatment is available. That statistic, however, assumes prompt access to antivenom, a sober victim, and a hospital within reach. Around 11:15 p.m., one of the friends noticed a western diamondback moving slowly along the block wall at the edge of the property. The distinctive rattle immediately caught everyone's attention. Instead of backing away, Daniel decided to prove he could handle it. He had watched videos online of professionals catching snakes and believed the technique looked simple, unaware that those handlers had years of training, proper equipment, and were completely sober. Ignoring the continuous rattling, Daniel walked over to where the snake had paused near a potted plant, his steps unsteady from alcohol. He attempted to grab the snake by the tail, his movements uncoordinated, his depth perception impaired. The moment he lifted it, the rattlesnake twisted mid-air and bit his right forearm approximately 4 inches below the elbow. The fangs penetrated deeply into the muscle tissue beneath. The snake released and dropped within a second, then retreated along the wall and disappeared. Even after being bitten, Daniel laughed and tried to step toward it again. A friend physically pulled him backward. Only when his arm began swelling rapidly did Daniel realize the seriousness of the situation. The tissue became discolored and extremely painful, with 2 puncture wounds already surrounded by spreading purple and red discoloration. His hand went numb, and he began to feel nauseated and lightheaded. His friends called emergency services. The dispatcher informed them the nearest ambulance was over 40 miles away and advised them to drive to the regional hospital, keeping Daniel's arm immobilized below heart level. They pulled out of the property at 11:34 p.m., more than 15 minutes after the bite. The drive was long and rough. Over the course of the next hour, the swelling spread steadily across most of his forearm, the discoloration deepening as they pushed through the dark desert highway. His fingers grew stiff and difficult to move. He was vomiting and sweating heavily as the swelling continued to spread, his strength visibly draining with each mile. The discoloration had crept well beyond the original bite site by the time the hospital lights appeared in the distance. They arrived at the hospital at 12:51 a.m., approximately 1 hour and 17 minutes after the bite. Staff administered antivenom immediately and began aggressive fluid resuscitation. The delay had allowed the hemotoxic venom to cause extensive tissue damage and disrupt his blood's ability to clot. Lab results confirmed severe coagulopathy, with clotting factors significantly depleted. Bleeding developed at insertion sites and failed to stop normally. He was transferred to intensive care and received blood products alongside continued antivenom treatment. His condition stabilized briefly in the early morning hours, raising cautious optimism among the medical team. Daniel's family, contacted in the early hours of the morning, made the drive from a neighboring county and arrived at the hospital around 6 a.m. They were told his condition was critical, but that the medical team was continuing to work. Through the morning and into the afternoon of August 4th, the team worked to replace what his body kept losing. Then, late in the afternoon, his situation worsened significantly. Internal bleeding had developed in his gastrointestinal tract, a late but recognized complication of severe hemotoxic envenomation, when prolonged clotting failure begins damaging blood vessel walls. The losses compounded faster than they could be replaced. His cardiovascular system, unable to maintain adequate circulation against the ongoing hemorrhage, began to fail. He died at 9:22 p.m. on August 4th, approximately 22 hours after the bite. The cause of death was hemotoxic envenomation with severe coagulopathy and hemorrhagic shock, an outcome made possible by the combination of a large venom load, significant alcohol intoxication blunting his early response, and over an hour without treatment in the desert. His friends, who had driven him through the dark in a desperate attempt to reach help, were left traumatized by the experience. Daniel's case shows that sometimes distance from medical care can be just as deadly as the bite itself. Our next story takes that isolation even further, a teenage content creator in rural Indonesia who encountered one of the most dangerous snakes on the planet and chose to film it instead of walk away. It was April 22nd, 2017. The afternoon heat pressed down on a village in eastern Indonesia, humidity making the air feel thick and oppressive as Rizky Aditya walked along a drainage ditch beside a rice field. Rizky was 19 years old and had recently started posting short wildlife videos online, hoping to build a following that might eventually generate income. He had grown up in the village, the youngest of 4 children in a family that struggled financially. He saw social media as his path to a better life, studying successful content creators obsessively, analyzing what made their videos popular. King cobras are the world's longest venomous snakes, with adults commonly reaching 10 to 13 feet. Their venom is highly potent and delivered in large quantities, capable of killing an adult human within 30 minutes in severe cases. Unlike many snake species, king cobras are known for their intelligence and aggressive defense of territory. Around 3 p.m., Rizky and a friend discovered a subadult king cobra near the drainage ditch, approximately 5 feet long and fully capable of delivering a dangerous bite. Rizky immediately decided it would make the perfect clip. He instructed his friend to record on a second phone while he used a stick to interact with the snake, narrating dramatically about his special connection with dangerous animals. The cobra's hood flared repeatedly as Rizky manipulated it, moving it from side to side. His friend repeatedly suggested they let the snake go. Rizky dismissed these concerns, insisting the footage was going to be amazing. At one point, he attempted to tap the snake's head gently so it would flare its hood more dramatically for the camera. Instead, the cobra followed the stick upward and struck forward with remarkable speed. Its fangs caught his right hand between the thumb and index finger. The snake released within a fraction of a second. The bite happened on camera, captured from 2 angles. For several seconds, Rizky seemed confused, staring at the puncture marks before panic set in. The more significant signs were immediate and systemic. Intense burning pain, spreading numbness moving rapidly up his arm, fingers tingling and growing difficult to move within minutes. Villagers helped transport Rizky on a motorcycle to a vehicle that could take him to a medical facility approximately 40 minutes away. During transport, his blood pressure began dropping. He vomited twice, complained of dizziness. His words came out fragmented and effortful. His eyelids drooped noticeably. He told his friend his vision was going double. At the facility, he received antivenom, a regional polyvalent formulation intended for Asian elapids, used as an emergency substitute in the absence of king cobra-specific antivenom, but the supply was critically limited. The facility had only 2 vials on hand. The recommended treatment for a bite of this severity required 10 to 15. Staff urgently requested additional doses from a larger hospital, but transfer would take hours the facility did not have. His condition deteriorated steadily. His heart rate, initially elevated, began to slow as his respiratory muscles weakened, a shift from tachycardia to bradycardia the attending staff recognized as an ominous sign. Saliva pooled at the corners of his mouth. A faint bluish tinge appeared around his lips. His arms and legs grew heavy and unresponsive as the venom continued blocking neuromuscular transmission. His breathing became rapid and shallow, then gave way to longer and longer pauses, a pattern of apnea the staff recognized as the final stage before respiratory arrest. The additional antivenom had not yet arrived. His family arrived at the facility within 2 hours of his admission, having traveled from a neighboring village. They gathered around his bed as medical staff worked to stabilize him, but the resources available were simply inadequate for the severity of his envenomation. The additional antivenom had not yet arrived. Rizki lost consciousness approximately 4 hours after the bite. His breathing became increasingly irregular before stopping completely. Without mechanical ventilation or adequate antivenom, resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. He died approximately 5 hours after the bite. The cause of death was respiratory failure caused by neurotoxic envenomation from a king cobra bite. His friend deleted the footage from both phones immediately and never spoke publicly about what happened. Rizki, Rahul, and Daniel all made an active choice to engage with a snake they had encountered. Our next story is different. Michael Garner wasn't showing off. He wasn't drunk. He made a single, reasonable-looking assumption, and it cost him everything. It was September 14th, 2014. The early morning sun had just cleared the tree line along a rural roadside in northern Florida, temperatures already climbing toward a hot and humid day. Dew still clung to the grass along the shoulder. Michael Garner, 46, was a truck driver who had always been fascinated by snakes, keeping several non-venomous species as pets at home. Friends described him as knowledgeable about reptiles, someone who could identify most native species. Around 7:40 a.m., Michael pulled his truck over after spotting what he believed was a dead eastern diamondback rattlesnake on the shoulder of the road. The snake lay completely motionless, its body twisted into an unnatural position, suggesting it had been struck by a passing vehicle earlier that morning. The eastern diamondback is the largest venomous snake in North America, with adults commonly reaching 5 to 6 feet in length. Its venom is highly hemotoxic, causing severe tissue destruction, coagulopathy, and potentially fatal complications if not treated promptly. He approached cautiously. The snake's eyes appeared glazed, its midsection visibly damaged. Michael used a stick to flip the snake over, watching for any response. There was none. Satisfied it was dead, he set down the stick and reached down with his bare hand to lift it by the midsection. What Michael didn't realize was that rattlesnakes can retain reflex responses for hours after death. The nervous system continues to trigger defensive biting reflexes when the body is touched or moved, long after the animal has died. The moment he picked it up, the snake's head jerked upward. The movement was purely reflexive, but the result was the same as an intentional strike. The fangs bit into his right thumb at the base near the palm before Michael dropped the snake and stumbled backward. He called emergency services immediately, providing his exact location. His voice was steady but tight. Within minutes, the pain had spread up his hand and into his wrist, a burning sensation layered over deep throbbing that intensified with each heartbeat. He told the dispatcher it felt like his hand was being crushed from the inside. The swelling progressed quickly, his thumb becoming grotesquely enlarged within 10 minutes. The skin stretched tight and shiny, taking on a mottled purple and red coloration. Small blisters had begun forming along the margin of the swollen tissue. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead, and he felt a wave of nausea, leaving him lightheaded and clammy. Emergency responders arrived within 18 minutes and found Michael sitting in his truck cab. pale and visibly frightened, the swelling already past his wrist. His pulse was rapid at 118, blood pressure borderline low at 94/60. Paramedics established an IV line, began fluid resuscitation, and administered IV morphine before loading him into the ambulance. During transport, he asked twice whether he was going to be okay. Jaw clenched, grimacing as pain moved up his arm despite the morphine. His blood pressure continued falling. The paramedic marking the swelling's leading edge with a pen found herself remarking it every few minutes. Treatment began immediately upon arrival. Blood pressure 82/50, heart rate 130, oxygen saturation dropping. Antivenom infusion started within minutes. Within 2 hours, lab results confirmed severe coagulopathy. Blood seeped from his IV site without clotting, his gums bled, and faint bruising spread across his forearm as capillaries broke down. He underwent emergency fasciotomy to relieve compartment syndrome, surgeons finding widespread tissue necrosis throughout the operative field. His urine had turned a dark tea color from myoglobin overwhelming his kidneys. Michael grew increasingly confused through the late morning, struggling to answer simple questions from nursing staff. At one point, he asked a nurse what time it was, and then asked again 30 seconds later, unable to retain the answer. In a brief window of clarity, he asked the attending physician directly whether he was going to lose his arm. The physician told him they were doing everything possible. Michael nodded slowly and said nothing more. He lost consciousness approximately 8 hours after the bite. His cardiovascular system, fighting the combined effects of coagulopathy, massive tissue destruction, and renal failure, could no longer maintain adequate circulation. He died approximately 12 hours after the bite. Despite rapid response and aggressive antivenom therapy, the amount of venom delivered in that single reflexive strike had proven fatal. Michael's case is a reminder that even knowledge and caution cannot fully close the gap between assumption and certainty. Our final case follows a man who had more experience than almost anyone in the room and discovered that expertise, without the right tools, can become its own form of overconfidence. It was June 7th, 2019. The late morning sun cut hard across a stretch of scrubland on the outskirts of a farming community in the Western Cape province of South Africa, the fynbos vegetation brittle from an unusually dry winter. Peter Van Wyck, 38, was a part-time nature guide and amateur herpetologist who led weekend excursions for tourists visiting the region. He had handled snakes informally since his teenage years and had completed 2 short courses on reptile handling through a private wildlife program in the province. He owned a lidded transport container, leather gloves, and a proper snake hook. He did not have any of these items with him that morning. He had driven out to check a fence line on a property where he did occasional maintenance work, not expecting to encounter anything. The puff adder is responsible for more snakebite fatalities in Africa than any other species on the continent. Adults typically measure between 3 and 4 feet, but their thick bodies and cryptic camouflage make them extremely easy to overlook against dry ground. Their venom is potently cytotoxic, destroying tissue at the cellular level and causing severe local necrosis, systemic coagulopathy, and cardiovascular collapse in serious cases. They are also capable of extremely rapid strikes despite their slow general movement, a fact that surprises even experienced handlers. At approximately 10:45 a.m., Peter noticed what he initially took to be a section of coiled rope near the base of a fence post. The brown and tan chevrons on a thick-set body blended almost perfectly with the dry grass and reddish soil surrounding it. He stopped and recognized it immediately as a puff adder, an adult female estimated at just under 4 feet. Peter knew the snake was dangerous. He knew he lacked his equipment. He decided to attempt a relocation anyway, reasoning that the puff adder was positioned directly beside a gate that the property owner's children used to access the backfield after school. He believed his experience was sufficient to compensate for the missing tools. He found a length of stiff wire fence offcut and attempted to use it as a makeshift hook. The wire was too flexible. When he tried to lever the snake's midsection upward, it bent under the animal's weight, and the snake shifted sideways. The puff adder struck without warning. No hood flare, no audible hiss, no obvious coiling. It simply moved, its head traveling the full extension of its reach in a fraction of a second. The right fang penetrated the back of Peter's left hand between the knuckles of the ring and little fingers. He reported feeling a sensation like a hot nail driven into the bone. The snake retracted and resumed its coiled position as though nothing had happened. Peter drove himself to a clinic in the nearest town, approximately 25 minutes away. At that point, roughly 35 minutes after the strike, the wound site had already begun swelling noticeably, the tissue pale and firm with redness spreading outward. The pain was severe and radiating rapidly toward his wrist. The clinic administered a single polyvalent antivenom unit, all they had, and arranged transfer to a larger hospital in the provincial capital, a 90-minute drive away. By the time he was loaded into the transfer vehicle, the edema had consumed his entire hand and extended past his wrist. The skin over his knuckles had blistered, the fluid beneath visibly discolored with early hemorrhage. His fingers had spread apart under the swelling's pressure. He described the pain as no longer feeling like his hand at all, more like something attached to him that he could not control. During transport, his blood pressure began dropping. His pulse was elevated at 124, blood pressure 88/54 by the time they reached the hospital. Faint purple bruising had appeared across his palm as capillaries broke down beneath the skin. At the hospital, lab work confirmed severe coagulopathy, his fibrinogen critically low, platelet count falling, clotting times significantly prolonged. Blood seeped continuously from his IV insertion site. A urine sample showed traces of blood, indicating early renal involvement. Surgery was performed that evening when compartment pressure measurements returned and his radial pulse had become difficult to locate. Intraoperatively, the necrosis was wider than the external presentation had suggested, the muscle fibers dark and unresponsive along the path of venom diffusion. Peter remained in intensive care for 6 days. He survived, partly due to the early antivenom administration and his general physical health, but he lost the ring and little fingers of his left hand to necrosis, and his remaining hand function was significantly impaired. His career as a nature guide ended. In the toxicology case report that documented his treatment, he later told medical staff that he had believed his experience was sufficient and that the certainty of that belief was precisely what had put him at risk. His case is used in regional snakebite response training as an example of a specific and underappreciated risk category, not the uninformed tourist, not the reckless teenager, but the partially trained responder who mistakes familiarity for control. He later noted that the gate he had been so concerned about was located on the far side of the property from where the snake was found. The children would not have encountered it. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.